By the time Vincent Marra was escorted out of the Caruso Foundation gala, not by police, but by his own business partners, who had just discovered exactly what he'd been hiding, three things had already happened that nobody in that room would ever forget. Dante Caruso had danced with a woman he thought was nobody. That woman had quietly dismantled Vincent's entire financial empire before the dessert course arrived. And the joke stopped being funny the moment Dante realized he didn't want to let go. Her name was Nora Bellini. She was 34 years old, with a full figure that filled out her midnight blue gown the way architecture fills out a skyline, with deliberate intention. She was a forensic accountant, not the kind who sat in gray offices reconciling spreadsheets, but the kind federal prosecutors called when they needed someone to follow money through shell companies, offshore accounts, and 15 layers of organized deception. She was the best in Chicago. Almost no one knew it, because Nora had spent the last 3 years making absolutely certain they didn't. She had come to the Caruso Gala on a job. Not for Dante Caruso. For a private client who needed to know what Vincent Marra had been doing with $40 million that had quietly vanished from a trust portfolio in 2021. She was there to watch, to listen, to collect information that could not be collected any other way. She had dressed for invisibility, dark gown, minimal jewelry, hair pinned up in a way that said nothing memorable about her. She had found a corner near the east wall, and she intended to stay there. She had not planned for any of what happened next. What Vincent Marra said to her that evening would start a chain of events that nobody in that room was remotely prepared to witness. Vincent Marra was 51 years old, and had spent every one of those years confusing money with intelligence. He had come from nothing, clawed his way into the Caruso orbit through ruthless negotiation, and a talent for finding leverage, and he had never forgiven people who reminded him of where he started. His particular cruelty, the kind that lives in men who are afraid of being exposed, was the cruelty of preemptive attack. He insulted before he could be insulted. He humiliated before he could be humiliated. He had built a career on reading rooms quickly and identifying the safest target in them. When he saw Nora standing near the east wall with a glass of champagne, he saw exactly what he wanted to see. A woman alone, a woman who looked out of place, a woman he could use for a quick, easy laugh in front of the 3 associates gathered near him. He crossed the room. He did not lower his voice. "I always wondered who they seat at the round tables by the wall," he said, loud enough for the nearest cluster of guests to turn. "Now I know, the catering company must have started sending their invoices as +1s. Someone laughed, a short, sharp sound that died almost as quickly as it had begun. Several people nearby found something urgent to study in their champagne glasses. Nora looked at him. She did not move. She did not look away. She took one slow sip and said, in a voice that carried no tremor whatsoever, "You should be more careful about who you speak to at events like this, Vincent. People remember." It landed nowhere. He laughed again, louder, and turned back to his associates. What he did not see, because men like Vincent Marra almost never see what matters, was what her eyes did the moment he walked away. They went to her phone, they opened a folder, and they stayed there for a very long time. Dr. Naomi Eisenberger at UCLA demonstrated through neuroimaging research that the brain processes social rejection through the same neural pathways that register physical pain. The body does not distinguish. What Vincent had done to Nora in front of those witnesses registered in her nervous system as injury. But what separated Nora Bellini from most people in that room was that she had long since learned to let injury convert into clarity, and clarity into precision. Dante Caruso had seen everything. He was standing 12 feet away, positioned toward a conversation with his head of security, but his attention had shifted the moment Vincent crossed the room. He had watched the entire exchange with the particular stillness that had made him one of the most consequential men in Chicago. Not by being loud, but by being absolutely exact about what he noticed and absolutely patient about what he chose to do with it. He had watched Nora's face throughout. He had watched her not flinch. He had watched what her eyes did afterward. He did not go to her immediately. He waited. And while he waited, he thought. 20 minutes later, he walked to her corner of the room. He had no clear plan. What he told himself later was that he'd gone to extend a professional courtesy, an indirect acknowledgement that what Vincent had done was not representative of the evening's host. The band had just shifted into something slow, and someone nearby made a remark about whether the gala's benefactor would open the dance floor. The remark was directed at Dante. It was the kind of social pressure he normally deflected without effort, and so, because the moment was there, and because Dante Caruso had spent his entire adult life using moments rather than avoiding them, he held out one hand to Nora Bellini and said simply, "Dance with me." There were people watching. Some of them, the ones who had witnessed Vincent's performance 40 minutes earlier, did smile. The implication was obvious enough: the boss and the woman by the wall. A gracious, performative gesture, something light to mention over cigars later. Nora looked at his hand, then at his face. She saw the calculation in it. She also saw something else, something he hadn't quite managed to neutralize. Curiosity, genuine, unguarded, and directed entirely at her. She set down her glass and took his hand. What happened on that dance floor was not what anyone in the room expected. She moved with the ease of someone who had long since made peace with taking up space, unhurried, certain, entirely present. He moved like a man who had, somewhere in the first 16 bars of music, forgotten what he had originally intended by the invitation. By the third measure, he had shifted his hand slightly at her back. Not more, not less. Precisely enough that it meant something he hadn't decided to mean yet. She said quietly enough that only he could hear. "Vincent Marra ran 4 shell companies out of a Cayman trust that your foundation's legal team approved in March of 2021. The fund manager signed off on documentation he never read. $40 million moved through those structures in 18 months. I have the complete paper trail indexed and ready." Dante did not stop dancing. "Who are you?" he said. "Nora Bellini, forensic accountant." A pause. "I wasn't hired by you. I was hired to document what Vincent did for someone else's purposes, but I'm telling you anyway, because what he said to me tonight was the kind of stupid that happens when a man has been protected too long by money he didn't earn, and men like that become everyone's problem eventually." The song was ending. His hand did not move. This is what Daniel Kahneman, after decades of research into human judgment, described as the moment System 2, the deliberate analytical mind, is bypassed entirely by something immediate and undeniable. Dante Caruso had operated on careful calculation for 20 years. Standing on that floor, listening to Nora Bellini explain, in 2 sentences, exactly what his own team had failed to catch in 3 years, something in his thinking rearranged itself permanently. He pulled back just enough to look at her properly. Not the way he'd looked at her when he crossed the room. The other way. The way that actually sees. "I want to see that paper trail," he said. "I know," she said. "That's why I memorized the summary. Do you want it now, or after your foundation's attorney has what I expect will be a very bad evening?" He almost smiled. It was not a thing that happened often enough for anyone to take for granted. What came next took 4 days and moved with the kind of efficiency that Nora Bellini brought to everything she touched. She walked Dante's legal team through every layer of Vincent's scheme: the trust misclassification, the inflated vendor invoices, the charitable disbursements that had never reached a single actual recipient. 114 pages, indexed, annotated, cross-referenced. She delivered it without theater and without apology, with the calm of someone who had been in worse rooms and had been the only person in them who understood exactly what the room contained. Vincent Marra was summoned to a private dinner on a Thursday. He arrived expecting a routine meeting. He found Dante, 3 attorneys, 2 federal witnesses arranged with particular care, and a printed copy of everything Nora had built. His expression moved through disbelief, then through rapid recalculation, then through the very specific collapse of a man who finally understands that every exit has been closed. He had spent years believing his proximity to Caruso made him untouchable. He had not understood that value converts to liability at the exact moment it becomes a crime that someone can prove. He was removed from the organization that night. The federal case that followed moved on its own timeline. Dante made no move to stop it and made one phone call that ensured it moved quickly. The following Friday at 7 in the evening, Dante Caruso knocked on Nora Bellini's office door. She opened it with a pen still in her hand and reading glasses pushed up on her forehead. He said, "I have a proposal," she said. "I assumed you would." He offered her the position of Director of Financial Intelligence. Not a contract, not a consultant arrangement, but a permanent seat with full access, full autonomy, and the kind of authority that her work had already earned in every room she'd quietly moved through for 3 years. He said it without preamble and without the softening language men sometimes use when they want something and aren't certain they have the right to ask. She leaned against the doorframe and looked at him for a long moment. "You came here to dance again?" she said. He didn't answer immediately. "I came because I haven't stopped thinking about what you said on that floor, not the 40 million. I didn't say anything else." "No," he said. "That was exactly the point." She stepped back and opened the door wider. Some things don't announce themselves. They simply become true while you're looking at something else. And by the time you notice, the joke has long since stopped being a joke. And the only sound in the room is the very particular silence of people who understand they are watching something real. If this story stayed with you, the like button is one quiet way to say so. And if you want to know what happens when the next woman in the room turns out to be the most dangerous person in it, subscribe because that story is already written.